Good afternoon, my wonderful babes and babettes. So good to be back. Oh my goodness, I was on hiatus for longer than I thought I would be, and apologies forthcoming. Monday, at least in my province, I'm not sure about the rest of Canada, but Monday is the civic holiday, and then yesterday I got a glut of work. 6 hours straight I worked yesterday, and about a 15-minute lunch break in there. So by the end of the day, I was kind of bagged. Couldn't make a video, and considering the subject matter, as I put on my serious face, considering the subject matter, I didn't want to go into it with dust and feathers in my brain. All right, so from here on in, content warning, I'm going to be talking about residential schools and their abuses, as well as the continuing narrative that's getting much more convoluted. And you'll see what I mean as we go through this. In the past, however long it's been since we last discussed this, since the episode on St. Eugene's, I have heard of only one other case of a residential school finding, and that was in Manitoba at the Fort Alexander School. And the numbers, Manitoba is an interesting province, okay, for Canada. I want to address a bit of Manitoba's Indigenous history insofar as I'm capable of doing. I don't know all the details, but they were very, very badly mucked over, shall we say, by the colonial narrative. Currently, the numbers for residential school deaths for the entire province sit in the 300s. I believe that is going to turn out to be quite low, actually, considering the findings at Kamloops and just one place alone was in the 300s. I don't imagine that a province as a whole, and you have to remember that most of the Canadian provinces are bigger than most of the American states, okay? If you are from America, look at a map and look at our provinces. They're huge. I don't imagine that the entire population of deaths for an entire province would be as low as the deaths recorded in one single school in British Columbia. However, before that death count was put in the 300s, on record, the death count had been in the 160s. That was nowhere near what has been found, obviously. And the continuation of the narrative says the Catholic Church, especially, needs to release its records on what the abuses were and what the death toll was for the for the schools that they ran. I have said before, these places were not exclusively Catholic run, but largely they were. And the Catholic Church is among the biggest institutions in Canada and also among the richest. Even though nominally the wealth belongs to the Vatican and so on and so forth. But, I mean, individual dioceses can be quite wealthy on their own. And a diocese is basically just like an area where people of certain churches come together. For anyone who isn't Catholic or doesn't understand that term, a diocese is basically got like a district under a particular bishop's jurisdiction. Okay, so in the Catholic hierarchy in the church, it would go deacon, priest, bishop, archbishop, cardinal, pope. Okay, I'm probably missing some ranks in there, to be fair, but it is an incredibly hierarchical system. The further up you go, the more power you have. The more power you have, the more knowledge you have. Also, the more power you can exercise over others. So in Manitoba, getting back to that case, recently there was a Catholic priest who publicly came out, and content warning for this one, because this really ticked me off, came out with the statement that residential school survivors are overblowing what happened to them in order to make money off of their own pain and suffering. Okay. Catholic Church, moral institution? No, sorry, not in my eyes. All right, point number one. Point number two, he apologized. Not immediately, but he apologized. Take that with a grain of salt, okay? The Catholic Church is run very similar to the mafia. Nobody, at least in the lower ranks, has all of the information, and nobody talks to anybody else about that information. So, for all I know, okay, as a settler myself, for all I know, this priest's comment came out of pure, unadulterated ignorance rather than out of white supremacy, bias, discrimination, but then the victims get blamed, moreover, for playing the so-called D card, the discrimination card. I have been discriminated against. I deserve reprisal. Both of those statements are true, but then largely because of the online world now where people can say and do whatever they like, just as I'm doing right now, people will meet with very harsh criticism that not only denies their history, but also denies their personhood and also denies the suffering that they have faced or that family members have faced. Remember, this is not ancient history we're talking about. The last residential school in Canada closed in 1991. I was a year old in 1991, okay? This is not ancient history. We need to address this now in a systemic manner, because currently what's going on in Canada is that I do believe that the mass movement towards finding and digging up all of these residential schools has been replaced by, shall we call, community efforts or even vigilante efforts to find these bodies that we know are still out there. Every single school in Canada probably is going to have its own bodies, okay? And we haven't even touched a sampling of all of the different institutions, okay? The problem with people doing this, even as a community, but especially as individuals, is that, for one thing, they could be charged with trespassing on private property. For another thing, deep ground scanners, because of the way the bodies were buried, there may even be different strata of bodies, mass graves, one on top of another, on top of another. Ground penetrating technology, scanning technology, is very, very expensive. So we actually require systemic help here and professionals to come and look, rather than people who are inexperienced and, as I say, could even be charged with trespassing on this property that is owned by the government and by the church. So preventative measures against further discrimination for the people who are suffering because of what has happened and what continues to happen in the communities with the findings of the residential schools. That needs to stop right now. We need to nip that in the bud. We need to prevent people from going off on those who are victims in this situation. And this is the part that really pisses me off, because I'm not a fan of victim blaming. I think that it is a disgusting practice, and I also think that we can all do better. So we have to try to do better. I'm not saying I'm perfect. God knows I'm not perfect, okay? I've got friends where they have basically straight up told me, I don't want to talk to you about this. I'm not mentally, emotionally capable of talking to you or anyone else about this right now. But I take this as especially you, because you have white skin. I, however, do not take that as an insult, okay? I can't help being white. My friends cannot help being Indigenous, and it's not a thing that you should have to help anyway. These intrinsic qualities, these are the things with which we are born. However, based on these intrinsic qualities, people have set up, as I have said before, arbitrary hierarchies. Theoretically, on these arbitrary hierarchies, in some ways, in some regards, I am, societally speaking, greater than the people to whom I refer. I refuse to say that I am, because an intrinsic quality is something that you cannot change about yourself. No one can change their race, no one can change their sexuality, so on and so forth. You know the sorts of things that I'm talking about, okay? Therefore, that's why I say that these hierarchies are arbitrary, because they are based on things that you cannot change. Nor should you have to change them to fit in, okay? That was the whole purpose of the residential schools to begin with, for one thing. But not only the exercise of power, the exercise of just pure power and cruelty, and we're doing it just because we can, but it was also to, quote, civilize the people in question. Okay, what'd you end up doing to them? You caused generations of oppression, generations of trauma, generations of depression, and in some cases substance abuse. I will openly and willingly draw a link between residential school suffering and such things as alcoholism, though again, and I have said this before, that is a stereotype. Not every Native person is an alcoholic. Duh. Okay? Just like not every white person is a white supremacist. And I hope that I am doing my part to tear down this hierarchy, this arbitrary hierarchy built on arbitrary qualities, by which I mean qualities that people cannot change. I'm not saying that these things don't matter. You know, I'm not saying that your skin color, your sexuality, your gender, I'm not saying that these things don't matter. I'm saying that no one should be building power structures based on those things. That's ridiculous. And that is pretty much the summation of human history, though. Because for as long as we've had a prefrontal cortex, we have been building hierarchies and power structures around various different qualities. I mean, you can see it in the divide between male, female, and, quote, other. You can see it in the divide between races, especially on this continent, but not limited to this continent, okay? I don't know all that much about South American history, but I know that the indigenous people there suffered tremendously, and especially under the conquistadors, but before that and after that as well. So I can really only speak to the experience of being a white female on a continent where white people are preferred, okay? I don't like it. I don't like that I am systemically preferred, because I want to do something to earn my status, shall we say. You know, I want status, shall we say, to be based on extrinsic qualities, the things that we can change, the things that we can improve. You can always get smarter, you can always get nicer, you can always do better things to better humanity, and that is what I truly believe, because I'm a socialist, we should base our hierarchies on, if we have to have hierarchies at all. But then you get into the whole divergent situation, and that's not good for anyone either. So, dissolve hierarchies, you know, base relationships on the people you can trust, and go to the people that you trust in order to help you solve your problems. I am not saying that you need to trust me because I'm putting in my best effort, okay? That's not the proper way to approach this narrative, okay? Again, I've said this before. I don't need to be called an ally to act like an ally. I don't need a fancy title. I don't need a fancy hat. You know, I just want to do what the right thing is to do. You just got to do the right thing insofar as you're capable. I recognize where my limitations are, and I recognize that I need to do more research. I need to go to people other than basically my one and only source of information on this at the moment. You know, but the news, as I say, is piddling out because of the 24-hour news cycle, and also because of white guilt. I don't like that term. No one should feel guilty based on their race. No one should feel guilty based on the actions of their ancestors. What we should do instead is to work to reverse the narratives, plural. And that is in defiance of the idea of white guilt. Because guilt is basically the opposite of doing something. You can sit and mope and say, oh, I'm so victimized, or I feel so guilty. You know, there's feeling bad, but then there's acting on your feeling. If you are doing it in a constructive way, congratulations, thumbs up. If you are instead taking your guilt or your anger out on people who have already been victimized, stop it. Thank you. All right, that is my video for today. Pretty much just an update on the whole situation with this in Canada. In the description, I will be leaving the hotlines that you can call if you are a residential school victim or survivor or family member thereof. And not only that, but tomorrow I will be coming back with another video on the lovely, lovely, lovely Truth and Reconciliation Commission, because read this and you can do structural change. Hopefully. Thank you. Hurrah. It's awesome. Love it, love it, love it. It's a very pretty document, but I have some other required reading to do beforehand. So that video, I don't know when in the day that will come out, because I have my job also, and the job has been somewhat demanding, which is why I didn't get the video out yesterday. Again, I apologize for that. But yeah, this is basically going to continue on like this for the next little while. The current job that I'm at is over on August 10th. That's when my contract is up. So after that, I will have a little more wiggle room to make these videos and to do more research, which will be lovely for all of us involved. So thank you very much for your attention and participation, and I will see you all tomorrow. Mwah!